Hello, my name is Jonathan Newnham, and today I will be presenting on the intersections between outlawry, revolutionary violence, terrorism, and the death of Somoza in 4 days in September. The nuanced distinctions between outlawry and revolutionary violence and also terrorism are not very clear. And both of these concepts are demonstrated in the things that we read in Death of Somoza and 4 Days in September. And they both vary drastically between the commando unit in Death of Somoza and the urban guerrillas in 4 Days of September, both by tactics and by the execution of their plans. Outlawry. What is outlawry? Outlawry has to do something around legal authority. So generally, an outlaw is someone who breaks the law, whether that be a violation of established norms or by laws in writing or stature of constitution. And it also specifies that they've gone past a certain extent of either revolutionary violence or other forms of violence. And they're excluded from legal protection, and they're also subject to society's punishments as well. And an example of this could be Jesus Agria. What set him apart was his ability to cross socioeconomic borders, such as the fact that he was actually very popular among wealthy people. And his life really does echo that of perhaps a Robin Hood. And he defined these social things that we share, and he did share some of his gains with the poor, like Robin Hood. And his legacy endures, as we learned in class and in Mexico's chapters in history, especially relating to that of the banditry time in Mexico's early periods. Revolutionary violence. Revolutionary violence almost specifically occurs with certain contexts and motivations. It's really an upheaval, and it is basically an entire societal transformation, and it's driven by the wanting to overthrow power or power structures, and it differs because it's not simply just criminal violence. It's very purposeful and very direct and specific. An example of this could be, as we learned in class, the Mexican Revolution, because in revolutionary violence, there's not just one faction. It can involve multiple different factions with their own interests that come together for something better, for to try and meet the needs of all of the multiple revolutionary forces. And these included Zapata and Pancho Villa, and it sought to address those specific issues within the society, such as the land reform, labor rights, and political representation. And it was obviously very purposeful because it resulted in significant social and political changes, whether that be in mindset or in how they viewed politics and how they changed the country. Terrorism. Terrorism is very deliberate. It's deliberate acts of violence or essentially for intimidation purposes. And it's not in the benefit of the people. So it could be just used as to create fear, panic, and disruption. And it's not a popular war. And it would be highly destructive also to positive institutions. And it also plays on that form of intimidation. Terrorists use violence to intimidate and coerce populations or governments, even those not responsible. And there is, although some vague ideological purpose or political goal, such as it serves ideological, religious, or political things. An example of this would be the Shining Path in Peru, which aims to create a Maoist regime in Peru, and it used many violent tactics, bombings, assassinations, and ambushes. They targeted security forces, politicians, and civilians, and the conflict resulted in many thousands of deaths within Peru and widespread fear over who was very famous for the Shining Path movement, essentially a massacre that occurred in Peru. In Death of Somoza, the commando unit is charged with the assassination of this disposed president, and it exhibits characteristics of both revolutionary violence and terrorism. And in the cases of revolutionary violence, their goal was to overthrow the oppressive regime of Somoza because, in their opinion, if he was still alive, he was still quite a threat. And they wanted to make sure that he would never come back to the country because he had said himself that he would try and come back. And they wanted to transform the order of Nicaragua. And as long as he was still there, Nicaragua was not safe in their opinions. And also the opinions of the country too. However, it was also a terroristic backing towards it because they used many kidnapping and assassination techniques and tactics that created much fear and panic. And their actions to target a high profile person like Somoza to achieve political change, even though he was really no longer a threat. He was just a normal, basically kind of just person living in Paraguay, living his life. And so they were kind of killed him. Although odd and as horrible as he wasn't necessarily causing harm to the country any longer. And the attack on Somoza's life demonstrates the intersections between these two modals of revolutionary violence and terrorism, and that it depends on perspective. Because you could really argue both of these as revolutionary violence. And in 4 days in September, the urban guerrillas also exhibit a blend of this revolutionary violence and terrorism. They fight against Brazil's regime during the late 1960s, and they also do it very bravely. And their goal is for freedom and political change, and they're doing this for the benefit of the people. And one of the scenes in the movie, there's the people when the people hear about this, they are very happy. And the other thing is that there's that short scene in the film where the people who work for the Brazilian dictator, the woman is like questioning her husband, saying like, "Is this? How can you do this?" And it's just like that's just his job. I mean, it's just his life, like killing people. And they also have the purpose of that they want these political prisoners to be exchanged. So they have a very set purpose, and we're going to do this until we get these prisoners relieved, the political prisoners. But you could also argue that it is terrorism, because technically speaking, the American ambassador, the purpose of it is to create fear and international tension, and their actions disrupt status quo and force attention directly to their cause, which you could also argue is revolutionary too, because they weren't being given that attention in the first place. And the example of this are their actions. They kidnap the ambassador and highlight the blurred lines between revolutionary violence and terrorism again. And also, the ambassador himself is just basically just a playing card. They're purposely taking him because within the regime, if they just were to pick another general, basically I don't think the government would really care. But because the U.S. is also supporting the Brazilian government, they're willing to not let this guy be sacrificed, essentially. And in conclusion, it's a very complex issue, and we have to consider many different sides, such as the motivations and the methods behind these groups. And we need to reflect on the interplay between these political objectives, violence, and then the political objectives, whether that be like social or economic or other things. The violence, whether or not it hurts people, and other various forms of does that violence reoccur structural violence within the country? And then how is the pursuit of change being pursued? Is it for the people? Is it for themselves? For themselves and eventually for the people? And the labels we assign depend on our own and society's perspectives in the country, and they depend on when and in which these actions occur. Thank you.